Okay, today guys we're going to talk about circles and segment lengths, and I want to apologize before we start for the background noise. Hopefully you can just focus on what I'm talking about. The pictures today are going to be similar to those the other day where we were dealing with angles, except for today we're going to be talking about segment lengths. So if the two lines cross in the center of the circle, then you can break those apart and have an equation to where you could find any parts that were missing. And so if I look at this first segment that has from A and C as my two lengths measured, you could do A times C, and that will equal B times D from the other segment. So again, it's like looking at that one segment and break it into the two parts that are there, multiply those together. That should equal the same thing as if you look at the other segment broken into the two parts labeled and multiplied together. In this other situation where the angle was outside of the circle, the equation's a little bit different, and I don't know that you'll find this in the book, but I teach it as outside times whole equals outside times whole. And so if you look at one line at a time, on the first one, the outside is B, and then the whole thing is B plus A, or A plus B. So I have outside times whole. And then on the other one, the outside is C, and then the whole thing is C plus D. So outside times whole equals outside times whole. That's the way that I remember that one. Okay, another situation where the outside times whole applies is with a tangent line. So this tangent line can be treated just the way that we treat this side that has A and B. So if I were doing this one, for the one that we know with the A and B, the outside is B, the whole is A plus B. For the C, if you think about it, the C part is outside, and it's the whole thing. So in that case, that becomes C squared. And so you'll see that in some books as a totally different formula. But if you learn it as outside times whole equals outside times whole, you only have to remember one formula there. That's when the lines are crossing outside. Again, when they cross in the inside, it's that multiplication formula that we discussed originally. Okay, here's our first example, and it's an outside times whole situation because the angle is outside. But we are looking for segment lengths, and we are missing this x, and that's what we're trying to find. So I'm going to set it up, the outside times the whole of the first one, so 14 times 14 plus 20, and that should equal the outside times the whole on the other one. That would be 16 times 16 plus x. So over here, you can just figure that one out real quick, and that would be 476. On this side, I would distribute the 16 in and get 256 plus 16x. Then subtract my 256, and I get 220 equals 16x. And then divide by 16, and I get 13.75. So that's just the basic use of the outside times whole formula. Okay, for the next example, I've done something a little bit more complicated. I've got kind of both rules in the same picture. We're going to find x and y. First of all, to find x, it's the rule where things are crossing in the middle. I'm going to focus on the 10, the x, the 9, and the 6 that are all inside the circle. So I'm going to use my rule and say 10 times x is going to equal 9 times 6. And so since 9 times 6 is 54, if I divide by 10, I get x to be 5.4. Then y is in my outside times whole formula, and so the y is the outside and the whole. The other line, the outside, is 6, and the whole thing is 6 plus 6 plus 9. This gives me that y squared equals 6 times 21, and so that would give us 126, and you could take the square root of that to get your answer. And I don't have a calculator handy, but I'm sure that you probably could type that in. Okay, for my next example, I'm also going to do a kind of complicated picture. And so this has two variables that are missing, but we're going to be using the outside times whole formula. You have to find one at a time. So I'm going to start with the x. I can use the 8 and the x and the 9 and the 16. So I'm going to do outside times whole equals outside times whole. And make sure that you're not doing outside times inside, that you're actually doing outside times whole. The whole thing would be 9 plus 16. So here I can distribute 8 times 8 is 64, 8 times x is 8x, and on this side we would get 225, and then we would subtract the 64, so 161, let me check my math, and then we would divide by 8, so x will be whatever 161 divided by 8 is. And again, you could get a decimal on that if you needed to. Okay, for my last example, I'm going to use the multiplication formula one more time. I have the segments inside the circle kind of broken apart by each other, and I can set it up piece times piece equals piece times piece. So 5 times x is going to equal 7 times 4. And so since 7 times 4 is 28, we're going to divide by 5, and we're going to have 28 divided by 5 as our answer. So it would be 5 point something as a decimal. And again, you can type that in and get a decimal if needed.